heartbreaking news. Our nation saw its deadliest mass shooting in years when a Louisiana man shot and killed 8 children this morning. Tonight, we're learning more about that gunman, Shamar Elkins, who was the father of 7 of those 8 slain children. Tonight, the community of Shreveport has been left shattered. The children, 3 boys and 5 girls, ranging in age from 3 to 11.
Police say the crime scene spans 2 houses. It ended when officers opened fire on the gunman during a police chase. Eyewitness News reporter Tim Pulliam is live now with new details tonight. Tim?
Liz Jory, we now know the names of the 8 kids shot and killed, and we're also learning that the shooter had ties to the military and was known to police.
2 days before he killed 8 children, Shamar Elkins posted a photo on Facebook. His oldest daughter was sitting across from him at a restaurant, biting into a sandwich. He captioned it, "Took my oldest on a lil one on one date." People liked the post. People commented. It looked like what a father does when he loves his child, when he carves out time just for her, when he wants her to know she is seen and valued and special enough to deserve a whole outing just for the 2 of them. It looked like love. It was the last documented moment of normalcy before everything ended. 2 days later, in the early hours of a Sunday morning in Shreveport, Louisiana, Shamar Elkins killed that daughter. He killed 7 of his own children and one of their cousins. He shot 2 women, the mothers of his children, and left a family and a city and an entire country trying to find words for something that does not have them. This is the story of what happened in Shreveport on April 19, 2026. It is the story of 8 children who should be alive. It is the story of a woman named Shaniqua Pug who wanted to end a marriage and paid a price for that decision that no human being should ever have to pay. It is the story of a man who had been telling people for years exactly what he was capable of and who was not stopped in time. And it is a story about what happens to Black communities in America when the warning signs are spoken out loud, when the threats are made directly, when the darkness is documented, and the response is still not enough to prevent the worst possible outcome. If you are new to Behind the Evidence, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. We tell these stories with the full weight they deserve, with facts, with honesty, and without looking away from the hard parts. Now let us get into it. Shreveport, Louisiana sits in the northwestern corner of the state, a city of about 180,000 people on the Red River, a city that has seen its share of hardship and its share of resilience, a city where Black families have built lives and community and belonging across generations. The Cedar Grove neighborhood, where the Elkins and Pug families lived, is a residential area of modest homes and known neighbors, the kind of neighborhood where children play outside on Saturday afternoons, and people wave at each other from front porches, and the sounds of a family gathering carry from yard to yard. Freddie Montgomery, who lived across the street from one of the homes where the shooting took place, told CNN that he had seen Shamar Elkins sitting on the front porch on Saturday afternoon, children playing in the yard around him. The 2 men waved at each other. Everything looked normal. When Montgomery woke up the next morning and saw law enforcement flooding the street, he asked an officer if the scene was bad. The officer said yes. Montgomery asked if there were fatalities. The officer said multiple. Montgomery asked if children were involved. The officer said multiple. 8 children. That is the number that Shreveport woke up to on April 19, 2026. 8 children between the ages of 3 and 11, 3 boys and 5 girls, killed in the early morning hours while most of them were still asleep. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office identified them by name: Jayla Elkins, 3 years old; Shayla Elkins, 5 years old; Braylon Snow, 5 years old; Kadarian Snow, 6 years old; Kayla Pug, 6 years old; Layla Pug, 7 years old; Marketon Pug, 10 years old; Saria Snow, 11 years old. Say those names slowly. Let them be people and not a number. Jayla was 3. She had not even started school yet. Saria was 11, old enough to have friends and opinions and a personality that was already fully her own. Between them, 6 other children, all killed in a span of minutes in 2 homes on the same street by the man who was supposed to be their father. 7 of the 8 were Shamar Elkins's own biological children. The 8th, Markaden Pug, was his nephew, his brother-in-law's son, a 10-year-old boy who happened to be in the wrong house on the wrong night. The 8 children's deaths more than doubled the total number of homicides in Shreveport and Caddo Parish for the entire year up to that point. That is what 68 minutes of domestic violence looked like in one neighborhood on one Sunday morning. To understand what happened on April 19, you have to understand who Shamar Elkins was, where he came from, what he was carrying, and what he had been saying to the people around him for years before that morning. Because this was not something that appeared without warning. The warning was there. It had been spoken out loud. It had been made explicit. And the people who heard it were left to manage it with the tools available to them, which were not enough. Shamar Elkins was born in December 1994. His biological mother, Mahalia Elkins, was a teenager when he was born and gave him up due to her struggles with crack cocaine dependency. He was raised by a family friend named Betty Walker, who became the mother figure in his life, who provided stability and love in circumstances that were already complicated before he was old enough to understand them. He eventually reconnected with his biological mother in his mid-20s, rebuilding a relationship across the gap of those early years. He served in the Louisiana Army National Guard from 2013 to 2020 as a signal systems specialist and fire support specialist. He was never deployed. He left the military as a private. By the time of the shooting in April 2026, he was working for United Parcel Service, a regular job, a daily routine, the surface of a life that looked from the outside like a man who had built something and was holding it together. He had a prior criminal record, which matters enormously in the context of what happened. In 2019, Elkins was arrested on 2 charges: illegal use of weapons and carrying a firearm on school property. The circumstances of the arrest are documented. He had fired 5 rounds at a vehicle near a school, telling police that someone in the car had first pointed a gun at him. The incident happened less than 300 feet from Caddo Magnet High School, and the shots were fired in the direction of the school while children were outside. He pleaded guilty to the illegal weapons charge in October 2019. The second charge was dismissed. He was placed on probation for 18 months. Under Louisiana law, a person convicted of illegal use of weapons is banned from possessing a firearm for at least 10 years after completing their sentence and probation. That ban was still in effect on April 19, 2026. Shamar Elkins should not have had a gun. He had one anyway. On April 21, 2 days after the shooting, authorities arrested a 56-year-old man named Charles Ford in connection with the rifle-style pistol used in the massacre. Federal ATF agents and the FBI are investigating how the weapon was obtained and how it reached Elkins's hands given his legal prohibition from possessing firearms. That investigation is ongoing. But the fact of it establishes something important, which is that a man who was legally barred from owning a gun was able to acquire one, that the prohibition existed on paper and did not exist in practice, and that the gap between the law saying he could not have a weapon and the reality of what he was carrying on April 19 is part of the story of how 8 children died. In 2016, Elkins had also been convicted of driving while intoxicated. He had a history that painted a picture of someone whose relationship with impulse control and legal boundaries was complicated and documented. But the piece of his history that matters most, the piece that connects most directly to the morning of April 19, is not a criminal record. It is a statement he made 3 years before the massacre. Betty Walker, the woman who raised him, told reporters that in 2023, when his then-girlfriend and soon-to-be wife Shaniqua Pug had considered leaving him and taking her children with her, Elkins became furious. He turned to Shaniqua and told her directly if they tried to leave, he would kill her, his kids, and himself. He said those words in 2023, 3 years before he carried them out. He said them to a woman who was considering leaving him. He said them to communicate that the cost of her freedom would be her life, their children's lives, and his own. This is not a gray area. This is not an ambiguous statement open to interpretation. This is a man telling a woman explicitly, in plain language, what he intended to do if she exercised her right to leave the relationship. And Shaniqua, who had heard those words in 2023, went ahead and married him in 2024. That is not a statement about her judgment. That is a statement about what domestic violence does to a person's ability to perceive risk clearly, about the coercive psychological landscape that a person lives inside when they have been threatened at that level, about how the cycle of control and affection and threat and reconciliation distorts the decision-making of the person being subjected to it in ways that outsiders cannot easily understand from the outside. By early 2026, the marriage was failing and Shaniqua wanted out. The divorce court date had been scheduled for Monday, April 20, the very morning after the massacre. Elkins and Shaniqua were supposed to appear before a judge that Monday morning to finalize the separation. Family members confirmed they had been arguing about the divorce in the period leading up to the shooting. Crystal Brown, a cousin of one of the women shot, told reporters the couple had been in conflict specifically about Shaniqua's decision to end the marriage. Elkins did not want it to end. His brother had told reporters he did not want to lose his wife. The divorce was not an abstract legal proceeding to Shamar Elkins. It was the final, formal, institutional confirmation that the thing he had threatened to destroy everyone over in 2023 was actually happening, that the woman he had told she could not leave was leaving, that the court was going to put a document in her hand the next morning that said so. He had been showing signs of deterioration for weeks. On April 5, Easter Sunday, just 2 weeks before the shooting, he called his mother and stepfather in tears. His stepfather, Marcus Jackson, described the call, the sound of a grown man breaking down, saying he was drowning in dark thoughts. He told Jackson he was thinking about taking his own life. Jackson tried to reach him. He told him he could beat it, that whatever he was going through, he could get through it. Elkins told him he was going to deal with it. His stepfather told CNN he wished he had gone ahead and gotten the help. Betty Walker confirmed that Elkins had attempted to take his own life in February 2026, 2 months before the shooting. He had previously sought mental health evaluation at a Veterans Affairs hospital and had stayed for a week and a half before being released. On April 9, 10 days before the massacre, he posted on Facebook asking God to guard his mind and his emotions against depression, anger, and anxiety. That post was public. It was visible to everyone who followed him. It was a man telling his community, in the language of faith, that he was losing the internal battle he had been fighting. And on April 18, the Saturday before the shooting, he took his oldest daughter to dinner. He posted the photo. He captioned it with warmth and pride. He was present with her, across a table, for a meal that would be the last time they shared anything. Whether he already knew what he was going to do the next morning is a question that investigators are examining. What is certain is that the gesture of that dinner, the one-on-one date, the photo and the caption, existed in the same 24-hour window as the violence that came after it. The same hands that held a sandwich with his daughter held a rifle-style pistol at 2 houses the following morning. The first 911 call came in just before 6 a.m. on Sunday, April 19. The caller was on the roof of a home on the 300 block of West 79th Street. This was the home where Shaniqua Pug lived with their children. The caller, Keosha Pug, Shaniqua's sister, reported that a suspect was inside the house, that a man had been shot, that multiple people inside had been hit. She said she and her children had escaped from the roof and were in the backyard. That detail, a woman and a child on a roof in the dark of early morning, jumping to survive while the shooting was still happening inside, tells you everything about the pace and the terror of what was unfolding. A second call came in establishing that the suspect was a relative of the caller. Dispatch was informed that approximately 9 people lived in the home. The caller reported that the suspect had shot everyone inside. 7 of the 8 children were killed inside that house on West 79th Street. One was found dead on the roof, apparently having tried to escape before dying there. Another child had managed to jump off the roof and survived with injuries. When police arrived and entered that house, what they found was the result of a man moving through a home where his own children were asleep and shooting them. Not in the chaos of a confrontation, not in the heat of an argument that went wrong. The children were asleep. They were not awake and running. They were asleep in their beds in the house where they lived, and their father came in and killed them. But the attack had begun somewhere else first. Before the first 911 call came in from West 79th Street, Elkins had gone to a home on Harrison Street where his ex-wife Christina Snow lived with her 3 children. At around 5:55 a.m., before the calls about the children had even been placed, Elkins shot Christina Snow. Her aunt LaShawn Berry told CNN that he shot her in the face. He shot her 9 times. He then took her 3 children, his children by her, and drove to the house on West 79th Street. Christina Snow, fighting for her life with 9 bullet wounds, told police he had taken her children and fled. She survived. He took her children to the second house and killed them there along with the others. The attack spanned 4 crime scenes, police said, 2 houses, a carjacking, and the road north toward Bossier City where the chase ended. After finishing at West 79th Street at around 6:15 a.m., Elkins carjacked a vehicle at gunpoint and led Shreveport police on a high-speed pursuit into the neighboring parish. The chase lasted about 15 minutes. At 6:29 a.m., officers confronted Elkins. Shots were fired. Whether Elkins was killed by officers or died by a self-inflicted gunshot remains unclear and under investigation by Louisiana State Police. He was pronounced dead at the scene at just after 7 a.m. The man who had told Shaniqua in 2023 he would kill her, their kids, and himself had carried out 2/3 of that statement. He did not survive the morning either. In the end, the only part of the 2023 threat he failed to complete was killing Shaniqua herself. She was shot, she was critically injured. She was hospitalized, but she was alive. Keosha Pug, who had jumped from the roof with her 12-year-old daughter, survived. Keosha suffered broken bones from the fall. Her daughter had scratches. Shortly after making it to the backyard, Keosha had received a phone call or placed one. A family member later described the call, the words that came through it. He done shot the kids. He killed the kids. 6 words carrying the weight of everything that had just happened in that house. 6 words that a woman said into a phone from a backyard in Shreveport, while her sister was inside bleeding and 8 children were already gone. Shreveport's mayor, Tom Arsenault, stood at a press conference that Sunday and said it was maybe the worst tragic situation the city had ever had. The police chief confirmed what investigators were already treating as a domestic incident, entirely domestic in nature, rooted in the separation that was supposed to be finalized in court the very next morning. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office confirmed the names and ages of the dead. The deaths of those 8 children more than doubled Shreveport's homicide count for the year in a single hour. Councilman Grayson Boucher said there was a true epidemic of domestic violence in Shreveport, that more than 30% of the murders in the city were domestic in nature. 30%. In a city where the majority of those victims are African American women and children. That number did not arrive on April 19. It was the context in which April 19 became possible. One detail in the institutional record of this case deserves specific attention because it speaks to the broader question of prevention and community response. In March 2026, just 1 month before the shooting, the Shreveport City Council voted to withdraw from a partnership with the Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office to operate a domestic violence resource center at a new police substation. 1 month before 8 children were killed in the city's worst domestic violence incident in memory, elected officials voted to pull back from the infrastructure designed to address domestic violence in the community. That timing is not a direct cause of what happened on April 19. Shamar Elkins's choices and his actions are his responsibility alone. But the withdrawal from that partnership is a statement about how the city was investing in the problem it already knew it had, and the statement it made was that it was investing less. The Shreveport City Council member Tabitha Taylor broke down in tears when speaking to CNN after the shooting. She said, "This is not a joke. This is real. This is the result when someone snaps." She said domestic violence in her community was staggering. She said the growing group of women affected were African American. Those words, said through tears by an elected black woman about her own community, are the most concentrated expression of what this case reveals about the specific intersection of domestic violence, race, and institutional response in America. The children who died on April 19 were black children. The mothers who were shot were black women. The community that is carrying this grief is a black community in a majority black city in Louisiana. And the institutions that existed to respond to the warning signs, to the mental health deterioration, to the prior threat made in 2023, to the illegal weapon that should never have been in anyone's hands, responded in ways that were insufficient to prevent what happened. This is not about blaming any single institution or any single decision. Shamar Elkins, Shamar's biological mother, was told by her son on Easter Sunday that he was having dark thoughts. His stepfather tried to talk to him. His brother-in-law tried to pull him outside and away from whatever was building inside him. The VA hospital had evaluated him and released him. The people who knew him were not indifferent. They were trying to hold a man together who had already decided, at some level, that he could not be held. The question that is harder and more uncomfortable is whether the systems that exist specifically to intervene at these moments, the mental health infrastructure for veterans, the domestic violence services for families, the firearms laws that should have meant he had no access to a weapon, were functioning with the weight and the speed that the warning signs demanded. The answer, judged by the outcome, is no. Researchers who study family annihilation, the specific category of domestic violence, homicide, where a perpetrator kills multiple family members in a single event, have documented the pattern consistently over decades. The perpetrator is almost always a man. The trigger is almost always a perceived loss of control over the family unit, most often a separation or divorce. The warning signs are almost always present in the weeks or months before the event, often in the form of expressed suicidal ideation, explicit threats, or significant mental health deterioration. And the victims are almost always the people the perpetrator claims to have loved most. In the case of Shamar Elkins, every element of that pattern was visible and documented. The divorce was scheduled. The suicidal ideation had been expressed to family members. The explicit threat to kill the children had been made 3 years earlier and never forgotten. The mental health deterioration was visible in his Facebook posts, in his phone calls, in his voluntary admission to a VA hospital. The weapon was illegal but accessible. The pattern was complete. What makes this case specifically devastating beyond the scale of the loss is the Saturday, the dinner, the photo, the caption. Because that image, a father and his daughter at a restaurant, the most ordinary and loving thing a parent can do, was posted to a public platform where anyone could see it, where his community could respond to it with hearts and comments, where the performance of devoted fatherhood was visible and reinforced by everyone who liked it. And 2 days later, those same hands killed that daughter and her siblings. That gap between the public image and the private reality, between the Facebook post asking God to guard his mind and the gun he was already planning to use, between the dinner date and the dark hours of Sunday morning, is the gap where the horror of this case lives. It is the gap where warning signs get missed because they are wrapped in the language of love and faith and fatherhood in ways that make the danger underneath them harder to see. Shaniqua Pug survived. She is in the hospital. She has been shot by the man she was divorcing, the man who told her 3 years ago that she could not leave without paying for it with everything she had. She survived. Her children did not. That reality, being the mother who lived when her children were killed, is a weight that belongs to no category of human experience that has adequate language for it. She wanted a divorce. She wanted to take her children and build something different, something safer, something without the threat that had been hanging over her family since 2023. She was 2 days away from walking into that courtroom and getting that document in her hand. She never got there. And the question of what she carries now, what the rest of her life looks like in the space where 7 children used to be, is one that no verdict, no community memorial, no amount of prayer or fundraising can fully reach. Christina Snow also survived. 9 bullets, shot in the face, fighting for her life while her children were taken to a house on West 79th Street. She had 3 children with Shamar Elkins, children who were living with her on Harrison Street, children who were taken from her house and killed. She is in the hospital. She is alive. Her children are not. The particular grief of a mother who survived an attempt on her life and lost her children in the same attack is not something that the human emotional vocabulary was built to describe. The community of Shreveport began gathering at the scene almost immediately. Stuffed animals, flowers, balloons in pink and blue, the specific visual grammar of a community trying to do something with grief that has nowhere else to go. A prayer vigil was held on April 20. Governor Jeff Landry and his wife announced that their foundation would cover the funeral expenses for all 8 victims. Community funds were established for survivors and for domestic violence prevention work. Caddo Parish Public Schools Superintendent Keith Burton called on the community to take care of its children and families, and those carrying the weight of the tragedy. City Councilman James Green stood at a podium and read the names of the dead one by one, saying that the city paused to honor the lives that were lost and the families forever changed. The ATF and FBI are investigating the source of the weapon. A 56-year-old man named Charles Ford has been arrested in connection with providing the rifle-style pistol that Elkins used. That investigation will determine how a man who was legally prohibited from owning a firearm came to have one on the morning of April 19, and it will hold accountable whoever made that weapon available to him. But the accountability that comes from that investigation, however complete it is, will not bring back Jayla Elkins, who was 3 years old. It will not bring back Saria Snow, who was 11. It will not restore to any of the 8 families the specific, irreplaceable presence of the children they lost. Marketon Pug was 10 years old. He was not Shamar Elkins's child. He was his nephew, his brother-in-law's son, a boy who was in that house on West 79th Street because that was the house of his family, a place he was supposed to be safe. He was killed alongside the children who shared a bloodline with the man who killed them, and his death adds a dimension to this tragedy that forces a reckoning with the total absence of boundaries in what Elkins did that morning. He was not targeting strangers. He was not acting in a moment of confused violence that struck people randomly. He moved through 2 homes, found children and killed them. All of them. Every child in both houses. The only ones who survived were the ones who made it to the roof and jumped. There is a question that this case forces that is uncomfortable and necessary. It is not a question about whether Shamar Elkins bears responsibility for what he did. He does, completely and exclusively. The question is about what the people and institutions around him could have done differently from 2023 to 2026, in the 3-year period between when he first made the explicit threat and when he carried it out. Betty Walker heard the threat in 2023. She knew it was real. What recourse did she have? What resources existed in Shreveport for a family member who had heard a man say explicitly that he would kill his children if his partner tried to leave? What pathway existed from that threat to an intervention that was substantive enough to change the trajectory? The answer in Shreveport in 2023 was limited. The Domestic Violence Resource Center partnership that might have provided some of that pathway was the same partnership the City Council voted to withdraw from just 1 month before 8 children died. This is not hindsight. This is the forward-looking question that the families of the victims, the community of Shreveport, and anyone paying attention to what domestic violence does to black families in America has the right to demand an answer too. What changed after April 19 that makes the next Shamar Elkins impossible? What legislation was introduced? What resources were restored or created? What protocols were put in place to ensure that when a man tells a woman he will kill her children if she leaves, that statement reaches an institution with the power and the will to act on it before it becomes a coroner's report? These questions do not have answers yet. They are being worked toward by advocates and community members and elected officials who are trying to do something real with a tragedy that demands more than prayers and stuffed animals at a makeshift memorial. The children who died on April 19 were beloved. Francine Monroe Brown, a cousin of Shaniqua, told reporters she would often drive past the house on West 79th Street on Sunday mornings on her way to church and see the children playing in the yard. "Happy children, joyful children," she said. Shaniqua was a great mother who provided a great home for her kids. Betty Pugh, another family member, said that was the way they were raised, to love their kids, to take care of their kids. Those children were loved. They were watched over and celebrated and raised in the warmth of a family that knew how to show up for each other. The violence that ended their lives was not an expression of anything about who they were or who their mothers were. It was the expression of one man's decision that his inability to accept loss gave him the right to take everything. Shaniqua Pugh wanted a divorce. That is the sentence at the center of this case. She wanted a divorce. She wanted to exercise the most basic human right available to a person in a relationship that was not working, the right to leave. She had been told 3 years earlier what that decision would cost. She had married him anyway, whether out of love or hope or fear or some complicated combination of all three that only she can fully account for. She had 2 children with him after the threat. She had tried to make the marriage work in the years between the threat and the divorce filing. And when she finally reached the point of no return, when the court date was set and the paperwork was in motion, she was 2 days away from the document that would have said the law recognized her right to be free. She never got to hold that document. She is in a hospital bed. Her children are gone. Say their names. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Braylon Snow, 5 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Kayla Pugh, 6 years old. Layla Pugh, 7 years old. Marketon Pugh, 10 years old. Saria Snow, 11 years old. They were not statistics before they died. They are not statistics now. They were children with Saturday morning energy and specific laughs and foods they loved and people they ran to when they came through the door. They were children who had their whole lives ahead of them, every single one of them, including Jayla, who was 3 and had barely started living yet. They deserved every year they did not get. The photo is still on Facebook. A father and his daughter at a restaurant. She is biting into a sandwich. He captioned it with something warm. People liked it. It still exists on a platform where anyone can find it, a document of the last ordinary thing before the worst thing, a record of a man who was already carrying what he was about to do into a restaurant and ordering food and taking pictures as though the next morning was not already planned inside him. That image is the thing about this case that stays. The distance between it and what came after is the distance between the face a person shows the world and the violence they are capable of hiding behind it. And it is a distance that no amount of social media scrutiny or community awareness can fully close, because some people are very good at the performance of love right up until the moment they stop performing. The investigation continues. The weapon's origin is being traced. The community is grieving. Shaniqua and Christina are in hospitals fighting for their lives. 8 funerals need to happen for 8 children who ranged from 3 to 11 years old. Governor Landry's foundation is covering those costs, which is a meaningful gesture and an inadequate response to what the state of Louisiana and the city of Shreveport and the country that watched this unfold owe to the community of Cedar Grove. The meaningful response, the one that honors what happened without just memorializing it, is the sustained, specific, funded, legislatively supported commitment to making the next threat made by the next man who says he will kill his children if she leaves the kind of threat that reaches an institution with the power and the will and the resources to stop him before Sunday morning comes. If you watched this and felt something, if it made you angry or heartbroken or both, share it. Not because this channel needs the views, because Jayla was 3 years old and Saria was 11, and they deserve to be more than a news cycle. Subscribe to Behind the Evidence if you have not. We are not going anywhere, and neither is the demand that these children's deaths mean something beyond the grief.